Welcome to the Friday Transportation Seminar at Portland State University. My name is Chris Monsieur. I'm an associate professor in civil and environmental engineering. Together with my colleagues, we co-organize and host this Friday Transportation Seminar for something like 10 years now, every Friday during the academic year. So today we're pleased to have some encore presentations that our students gave at the Transportation Research Board meeting in Washington, D.C. Most of us have returned and recovered, are back on the Pacific time zone. So I will let them introduce themselves, but we have three great presentations. And so Alex Bigazzi is a PhD student in civil and environmental engineering. He'll be making the first presentation. So mic on?
Mic on.
All right.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Dr. Monsieur. And just make sure that, okay. So, Alex Bigazzi is my name, and I've been here for a few years. I got my master's here as well in the civil engineering department, now working on a PhD. And I'm working a little bit more in emissions and exposure now, and this is coming out of where I was coming from, which is emissions modeling. So kind of moving from what's coming out of the vehicles to what's in the air, and then eventually, hopefully, be getting to what we're breathing. And the presentation I'll give today is actually kind of a mashup of two different papers that we presented at TRB this week. And they're mashed together because they both are on the same theme, which is the relationship amongst trucks, traffic congestion, and motor vehicle emissions, pollution emissions. So this is work that came out of my master's thesis, which was looking more generally at the relationship between traffic congestion and motor vehicle emissions. And what we're doing is trying to quantify the effect of congestion on both motor vehicle efficiency, so emissions rates, and also on motor vehicle travel demand volume, and looking at how those two affect total emissions. And the outcome of that was basically that the effects of congestion on emissions are kind of offsetting in terms of they tend to have one direction on emissions effects and then the opposite effect on travel volume. So if emissions rates tend to go up, then you also see lower travel volumes, and those pull total emissions in different directions, right? So heavier congestion tend to have higher emissions rates, but it also tends to suppress travel demand. And so the net effect, whether emissions are going to go whether the net emissions go up or down in congestion depends on which is the bigger effect. So what we did here was take that and break it apart into the light-duty and heavy-duty vehicle classes, because they have really different emissions characteristics. So LD and HD here are going to be light-duty and heavy-duty. And then take it one step further and say, okay, we have these two vehicle classes. What types of traffic management, especially vehicle class-specific traffic management, can we use to try and reduce emissions? And so really simple summing up these objectives here. What are the emissions characteristics of light-duty and heavy-duty vehicle classes and congestion? And then what are the expected emissions effects of vehicle class-targeted traffic management strategies? I'm going to give a very broad picture of the modeling methodology here, but essentially the congestion is represented by the traffic speed, average aggregate traffic speed, and that's a pretty common metric. And then first, we find an equilibrium in terms of the traffic conditions between the traffic speed and the travel volume. And this includes both how the traffic speed is a function of the quantity of travel demand, or vehicle miles traveled is the slang we use, VMT. So the traffic congestion level in terms of speed is a function of volume, but then also the reverse effect. So how does the traffic volume respond to changing traffic speeds? And once we have that, we do a little bit of emissions modeling to get emissions rates as a function of the traffic speed. And then you simply combine the rates with the volume to get the total emissions. So pretty simple framework there. And once again, what I'll be talking about today, we just have done this separately for light-duty and heavy-duty vehicle classes. A smidge more detail on the modeling approach here. For the emissions model, we use the MOVES 2010 emissions model. If anyone's familiar with it, it's the standard for emissions modeling in the U.S. It comes from the EPA. And we looked at 5 different pollutants, greenhouse gases, and that's CO2e, or carbon dioxide equivalents, carbon monoxide, fine particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, or NOx, and then gaseous hydrocarbons, HC up there. And for the traffic model, we use the BPR function, which relates travel demand, volume, and speed, very common. And then for demand elasticity, kind of looked at also the relationship between VMT and speed. So jumping right into the results, here you have a look at the emissions rates. So we have different average traffic speeds on the bottom from 10 to 70 miles an hour. So here's your congested conditions, and those are free flow down there. And then on the vertical axis, we have simply the ratio of the heavy-duty to light-duty emissions rates per mile. So a value of 1 on the vertical axis means per mile, heavy-duty and light-duty vehicles are emitting about the same mass of pollution. A value of 2 means heavy-duty vehicles are emitting twice as much per mile of travel. Really easily seen here is that, especially for fine particulates and NOx, there's way more emissions per mile on a per-mile basis from heavy-duty vehicles. So NOx around 20 times greater mass emissions per mile. Fine particulates up to 60 times. So this is saying that in congested conditions, one heavy-duty vehicle is emitting about as much pollution per mile as about 60 light-duty vehicles. Okay, so much higher emissions rates. Oops, what have I done? Much higher emissions rates per mile for the heavy-duty vehicles. The second part, and this is important for this analysis, is that these lines tend to slope downward. And what that means is that heavy-duty vehicles are more sensitive to congestion. Their emissions rates go up disproportionately more than light-duty vehicles in congestion. Okay? So here we have a subset of vehicle class, typically, say, 5 to 15% of the number of vehicles on the freeway that have much higher emissions rates, and also emissions rates that are more sensitive to speed. So here we have a small subset of the vehicles that we could focus on with more emissions benefits from congestion mitigation. A little more bang for your buck in terms of emissions reductions for these vehicles. And to illustrate that and delve into it a little bit more, we looked at a case study of a few different lane management scenarios. So base conditions here is a typical 3-lane freeway with moderate level of congestion on there. For traffic engineers, a volume capacity ratio of 0.86. So about 86% of capacity. That's a way to look at that. It's 10% heavy-duty vehicles, and each heavy-duty vehicle has a passenger car equivalent of 1.5, and that means that it occupies about as much roadway space as 1.5 light-duty vehicles or passenger cars. All right, so we're going to look at 4 different opportunities for class-specific or class-targeted traffic management. So the first one is we're adding a TOL, and that's a truck-only lane. A truck-only lane is exactly what you think a truck-only lane would be. It's a lane exclusively for trucks, really for commercial vehicles. And these can be tolled or they can be untolled, and they can be separated by some sort of a physical barrier. There's a lot of different ways you can implement these. They can be on the left side of the road. They can be on the right side of the road for different operational characteristics. But we're just going to say here's a exclusive lane for heavy-duty vehicles, and then the remaining lanes are for the light-duty vehicles. That's the first scenario. Second scenario, we've added a GP lane, which is a general purpose lane. So in this scenario, we've still added 1 lane of capacity. So it's about a 1/3 increase in capacity, right? But now all the vehicles are sharing all the lanes. Third scenario, we've taken a general purpose lane away and converted it into a truck-only lane. So there's no change in the physical capacity. We still have a 3-lane roadway, but now we're providing 1 exclusively for the heavy-duty vehicles. So this is kind of preferential capacity for those vehicles. And then finally, we've simply taken away the general purpose lane, but not added the truck-only lane. So 4 different ways we can work with the lanes, on the physical lanes on this freeway. So let's look what happens in the context of this analysis. So first, for the 2 truck-only lane scenarios, let's first look at if we add a truck-only lane. So now we have a 4th lane. Well, we've added capacity, congestion has gone down, so we see speeds increase for both the light-duty and the heavy-duty vehicle classes. And that's the top left. And those arrows are going up, and they're green because as the speed increases, the emissions rates will tend to go down. So we have an emissions benefit here. Well, the speed increases are also going to induce some additional travel. Right? So we have the vehicle volumes for both light-duty and heavy-duty vehicles going up. And now we have a red arrow going up because higher vehicle volumes mean more total emissions on the freeway, ceteris paribus. And then finally, what's the net effect? Well, for light-duty vehicles, and this is for greenhouse gas emissions, it varies by pollutant. For light-duty vehicles, the total emissions are going up. And the reason for that goes back to the first results slide I showed with the emissions rates. Light-duty vehicle emissions rates are less sensitive to speed than heavy-duty vehicle emissions rates. And so the emissions benefit in terms of lower emissions rates is more than outweighed by the emissions detriment of a higher vehicle travel volume. Does that make sense? Now, for heavy-duty vehicles, the effect is opposite. Heavy-duty vehicle emissions rates are more sensitive to speed, so that's the bigger effect. Total emissions for heavy-duty vehicles go down because the emissions rate savings outweighs the emissions volume increase. Okay, so this is an illustration of how that difference in the emissions rate sensitivity plays out in terms of traffic management strategies. Emissions rates going up for one group, but down for the other one, even though congestion is eased for both. Now, it's a little different if we look at the truck-only lane conversion. For the trucks, it's the same, because either way, they still have their own lane. For the light-duty vehicles now, we've taken away a lane. So up the top, you see the speeds have gone down, and it's a red arrow because the emissions rates have gone up. But there's also a slightly lower travel demand volume on the facility. So it's a green arrow going down for light-duty vehicles. And once again, the dominant effect for the light-duty vehicles in terms of greenhouse gases is a reduction in total emissions for that vehicle class. So now we have emission savings for both. So okay, geez. So what does this mean in terms of total emissions, so not by vehicle class? Well, here is the 4 different scenarios and the percent changes for all 5 pollutants studied. And don't worry about each one of these, but the big picture to take away is that truck-only lane conversions have consistently better emissions performance than the general purpose lane management strategies. Okay, so truck-only lane conversion has the greatest emissions benefits for 4 of the 5 pollutants. And the 5th one, hydrocarbons, which are more sensitive to speed than the other pollutants, has the lowest emissions or the greatest emission savings from adding a truck-only lane. If you compare these two, if you're adding a lane of capacity to the freeway, for all 5 pollutants, you have better emissions benefits from adding a truck-only lane than from adding a general-purpose lane. Again, illustrating from the beginning, you get more bang for your buck providing congestion mitigation for heavy-duty vehicles than light-duty vehicles from an emissions perspective. And so this analysis is sensitive to a lot of the parameters, and I don't have time to go into all the slides, but one that I found particularly interesting is the sensitivity of the emission savings to the demand elasticity. So the demand elasticity is how much vehicle volumes are expected to change with changes in speed. It's a key parameter. It's going to vary a lot by context. There's a lot of uncertainty in quantifying it, much less predicting it if you're looking at a cost-benefit analysis for a potential mitigation strategy. So it's really hard to know what this value is going to be. So this is 0, which means essentially vehicle volumes are insensitive to congestion. It doesn't matter what the congestion is on the freeway, all vehicles are going to travel the same amount. And at the opposite end, we have 1, which is saying that drivers adjust their driving habits a lot to speed. And here's the 4 strategies. And so adding capacity gets worse the more sensitive vehicles are because we're reducing congestion, so volumes are going up. On the opposite side, if vehicle volumes aren't responsive to changes in speed, then the added capacity scenarios are the best because we're saving emissions rates but not increasing the vehicle volumes at all. So 2 things from this. 1, we started at 0.3, which is kind of a moderate value from the literature. And it turns out that's a very narrow range where all 4 strategies result in emission savings. Right? So this is going to be a key parameter because once we're outside of this range, if that's where we are, then we can't expect savings from all 4 strategies. But the biggest thing is that the truck-only lane conversions, the black circles here, are really, the emissions benefits are really robust to uncertainty in this parameter. So across a wide range from almost 0 all the way up to 1, we get pretty steady, consistent emissions benefits from the truck-only lane conversion strategy. And that's a really nice outcome because there's a lot of uncertainty in this parameter. And so even if we're having trouble quantifying this, we can still expect some pretty consistent benefits from the truck-only lane conversion. Whereas if we're adding capacity, well, you could see the emissions benefits are going to vary a lot depending on demand elasticity. So summing it all up, you get greater emissions benefits from congestion management for heavy-duty vehicles than for light-duty vehicles. And we showed that with truck-only lanes as an example. More benefits from truck-only lanes than general-purpose lane strategies. But these results are sensitive to demand elasticity values, so that's something you're going to want to look at when assessing the likely environmental impacts of traffic management. And I think I came in maybe a minute or two under. Do we have a minute or two for questions? Yeah, time for one. All right, one awesome question. Sure.
As the four strategies that you mentioned, one was removing a general purpose lane, and why was that analyzed as a control? And if so, why, or how were we supposed to see the general purpose lane in context of the other?
So why did we look at
removing the general purpose lane? Yeah.
Well, it is one of the options we have for traffic management, and whether we want to do that depends on a lot of factors, not just emissions. But it is something that happens either purposely because we've decided we want to put in, say, a BRT, a light rail line. We've decided to allocate that physical space for some other purpose. So it is one of the options. And sometimes it just happens anyway because of construction or there's a lane closure for some reason. So, I mean, it is something that happens sometimes. We lose a physical lane. It's also just interesting, and I didn't really have time to go into it, but it's interesting to see that we still see emissions benefits for some of the pollutants, even taking away a lane, and that's because of the demand response to that.
Okay, thank you, Alex.
Thanks, all.
So we'll do the switch over, get Colin mic'd up. So Colin's going to be talking to us about age-friendly Portland, preparing Portland's transportation system for demographic shifts. And Colin Rowan is a master's in urban regional planning student here at PSU.
Hello, everyone.
Mike, is a red light on?
Oh.
On the mic. Just make sure. Good. Okay.
Okay. Good to go. Hello. My name is Colin Rowan. I am a very recent graduate of Portland State's Masters of Urban and Regional Planning program. I am going to present to you some work that has been done in Portland in the past years on making it a better community for the aging population for demographic shifts. I will be talking quickly about the TRB session that I presented at on Sunday, then take a quick look, an overview of what Portland is doing to prepare for these shifts and these changes demographically, then take a look at what my particular part in this conversation is, which was our workshop project. The name was Orca Planning was our group title. I'll describe what an Orca is. Specifically, I'll talk about the transportation recommendations that we came up with. Then look at what Portland's continuing efforts and what work needs to be done in order to cultivate a city that works for all people. If I have enough time at the end, I will get into a short discussion about some potential ways to shift planning school curriculum in order to be more inclusive of health and a number of other things outside of just transportation, say your transportation planner, how to incorporate a lot more of the interconnections between the built environment and health outcomes. So the TRB session, Creating Age-Friendly and Accessible Travel Environments, was the first time that there's been a seminar that allowed a number of people to speak about different work that was going on around the country and actually around the world. These presented a number of local community approaches, Portland, New York City, which are America's 2 age-friendly communities as designated by the World Health Organization. There was presentations about complete streets and how they affect older adults, and presentations about signal timing and how different walking speeds and how much time people need to cross. So it was a group of policy experts, transportation planners, and researchers, and it was a really good conversation. So quickly, we're all in Portland, so we know this. It's a small city, 600,000 people, depending on how you cut it, about 2.5 million people in our metropolitan area, known for livability, access to nature, all these things that we kind of know about. But important to note that right below that is a vacant lot with a parking lot. And kind of infamously, it's a place where young people come to retire. So all is idyllic in this planning nirvana stride the Willamette, right? Well, that's not how most of Portland is, as you know. This is a very common scene. This is just a screen grab from 122nd, right by Halsey. And this is not anything that is too surprising, because it's a very dense central core that was built around a streetcar network, 200-foot blocks. But then with the advent of the automobile, there was much more sprawling development. So this is something we're familiar with. But so if Portland is a great place for young people to come to retire, how is it for older people that are actually looking to retire? And how is it for older people in general? So demographically, Portland is a place that does have a larger number of younger people, but the population is getting older, similar to the rest of the United States. So demographically, between 2000 and 2010, the population of 50 to 59-year-olds, the baby boomers, increased by 31%, and between the 60 to 69 population increased by 61%. In 2010, 12% of the population was over 65. In 2030, it will be about 20% of the population. So that's 1 in 5 people will be over 65. So regionally, this is also true throughout Oregon. The number of over 65-year-olds will increase by 83%. And this is just a visual of how it might be to be an older person getting around, or actually for anyone getting around, what challenges you might face. This is from the Portland plan, and this was an analysis of our sidewalk completion. It's important to note that in Portland, higher concentrations of older people, and it's kind of difficult to see, but it's as far as Portland is concerned, it's up there and over there, that's where concentrations of older people live, and it's also where concentrations of younger people, like children, live. And that's also where their transportation system doesn't have sidewalks. There are not convenient crossings, not that they don't have sidewalks, but the sidewalk infill is not complete, and the bicycle network isn't complete. Transit access, north and south, especially east of I-205, is incomplete, and those are places where older people live, and other historically underserved communities, such as lower income families. So this is just one. This is from Greater Portland Pulse. There's a great regional age-friendly planning page that they have that has a pretty good conversation about the challenges that the region faces for an aging population. So I keep on using this phrase age-friendly. And so what is age-friendly? The World Health Organization identifies an age-friendly city as one that encourages active aging by optimizing opportunities for health, population, and security in order to enhance the quality of life as people age. So this is about a life course. This is about a continuum of aging. So it's about making a city that's really good for older people while making it a great place for all people. It's important that it's not just about the oldest old, or it's about making a better place for all people, and a place where older people can live more successfully in that area. So age-friendly planning influences. This is the domains that the World Health Organization uses, and 3 of them really relate to planning pretty strongly: the outdoor spaces and buildings, transportation and housing, or the built environment. But planning also encompasses and interrelates and interconnects all these other components of it. So this beautiful little flower, in the center, you end up having a blossoming life, I guess. So is Portland age-friendly, and what needs to be improved? That's something that Portland has been addressing and looking at, and it's almost a decade-long history. Fall 2006, led by Portland State's Institute on Aging, some of the first conversations globally happened in Vancouver, BC, where the first global age-friendly cities project, the conversation about how cities globally will confront these changing demographics that they haven't really prepared for in the past. So in spring of 2007, also led by the Institute on Aging, an assessment of Portland's age friendliness was done using those domains that you saw before. That work has continued into Portland being designated by the World Health Organization as an age-friendly city, which requires them to do a number of things that we have been doing. And then one of those things is to have an age-friendly action plan, which is something that is part of the Portland plan, and I'll describe that development soon. But the Portland plan initially didn't have language that discussed aging populations. It was very focused on youth and thriving youth, which is incredibly important to have successful older people. You need to have successful lives all the way through that continuum of aging that I was talking about. But through gaining through a number of very strong activists, including a number of agencies, TriMet has it's called CAT, which is a accessible transportation committee, and a number of other Elders in Action, Regional Oregon, AARP, the American Association of Retired People, have all advocated for these changes. So the Portland plan expanded its reach and gave a seat at the table for older communities. So where I come in and where my project team came in was where there needed to be a vision created for what an age-friendly Portland could be in the future. What would that hold, and how that would, what changes to the built environment would need to be made. So ORCA planning came about through this. If you're not familiar with it, Portland State University's Masters of Urban Regional Planning program has a workshop, which is a two-term project where we are hired by usually a public agency or a nonprofit. It's a traditional process where we send out an RFP, hired on by our clients, develop a MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, develop a work plan, and then go about a very robust public participation process in order to assess people's needs in the community. From that, we are able to develop a vision for an age-friendly Portland. So you can kind of see where we're nested in this conversation. So this is our process, and as I said, the public participation process is the most important part. We had a number of stakeholder interviews, people from almost all the different bureaus throughout the city, a lot of the advocates that work in the community and experts around the region and also around the country. But then what was really important, we sat down with people, a baby boomers club, or a group of people who have an intergenerational conversation ongoing between high school kids and older adults. We had just a really great turnout of these small, usually about 10 people sitting down, similar to a focus group, but we called them talk shops because they're more informally. But we asked people, what do they need as they grow older? So from there, we also performed, in total, we came up with a final report. That final report also it focused on evaluations of housing, neighborhoods, and transportation, but it also came up with a number of evaluation criteria so we could develop an alternative analysis and gave these alternatives to the city, and our client was the Bureau of Plan and Sustainability. So the vision that we came up with, I'm going to have to go through this a little bit faster, but really the key part of that vision is that the lives of older adults will abound with choice and opportunity. And if we think about what choice and opportunity is, it means you can get around, you can do things that you need to do every day. So key to this is a well-balanced transportation system that will enable older adults to safely and conveniently access the things they need. So these are our recommendations, and if you take a look at our report, which I'll have a link to at the very end, there's a lot more. It's too long of a document, but it has some great recommendations and has some great case studies to take a look at. But far and away, what both advocates and what people that we spoke to identified was pedestrian needs, that walking around in neighborhoods, being comfortable, safe, and secure walking around those neighborhoods was difficulty. And getting to transit was something that was seen as a challenge. And as a very car-dependent cohort that the baby boomers are, as they shift to maybe not being able to use automobiles as conveniently or easily, a lot of these changes need to be made to the built environment. Of course, these will improve outcomes for all people. Also, low-stress bikeways. A lot of people, both for transportation and recreation, were interested in having better access to bikeways and even more education on how to use them and how to safely get themselves from where they live to the low-stress bikeways. Safe Routes for Elders program, especially something that involved travel training. There's a program that the City of Portland has done called Ped Pals, expanding something like that where if you haven't walked and you haven't gotten yourself to a senior center or to a healthcare facility, this helps out. And then a number of innovative transportation options were developed, including increasing use of low-speed electric vehicles, neighborhood electric vehicles, and then paratransit is a huge component of that and making that more efficient. Paratransit is on-demand, dial-a-ride type Medicare and Medicaid usually funded transportation. So we also had neighborhood recommendations that included a 20 is plenty, being able to have 20-mile-an-hour streets in the neighborhoods, having more recreation and access multifunctional schools. And these are things that have been incorporated into the Portland plan and into the comprehensive plan. So our key results, our real takeaways, that Portland really is fundamentally age-friendly. Also, older adults bring value to the neighborhoods. They have skills and they have knowledge that they can share. Additional consideration is needed. The definition of equality and equity can be expanded. And older adults have unmet needs, and as the population grows, those needs are going to increase. So then there's opportunities to address this. So these are sort of the ongoing work right now. The Age-Friendly Action Plan, which came out of one of the Portland plan's over 100 action items. I believe it was action item 108, was to create this age-friendly action plan. That is in the works right now. It's in draft form. Institute on Aging and Bureau of Planning and Sustainability are working on that. And the comprehensive plan update that involves a lot of neighborhood planning, housing, schools, and healthcare considerations are being more inclusive of the aging population. So I don't think I have time for these changes, but a common language is very important. Right now, when you use the word access and mobility, it means something different for someone who does health versus someone who does gerontology versus someone who does planning. So common language and an increasing number of planners being able to work with public health and gerontological associations and groups will be very important in the future. So thank you for your time. And I don't know if I have time for any questions. Probably not.
Yeah, we'll do the transition. There'll be time for questions after Oliver's presentation. So thank you, Colin. So next up we have Oliver Smith. He's a PhD candidate in the Urban Studies and Planning program. He's going to talk about peak of the day or daily grind, commuting, and subjective well-being.
Hi, so yeah, again, Oliver Smith, and I'm going to be talking about the dissertation research that I've been doing past couple of years. It's on connections between commuting and subjective well-being. And basically, the past couple decades, there's been a lot of research on happiness and different influences on happiness in different domains, home, work environment. But travel is an area where there hasn't been a lot of research on on happiness, even though we travel every day. Often large portions of our days are devoted to moving around. So for this project, I'm focusing on the commute trip from home to work. And I was wondering how things like having mode options, different ways of getting to work, bike commuting versus car commuting, longer trips versus shorter trips, different demographic variables, and different attitudes about travel, how those things might affect people's commute happiness or commute well-being. And also interested in whether commuting might influence overall well-being. So I conducted a survey last January and February where I did a web-based survey of people commuting to central Portland. It's downtown, Lloyd Center, central east side, and northwest. And basically, sent an email out to different companies and had asked if they would be willing to distribute the survey to employees at those companies. And I got a pretty good participation rate and got an even split. Well, I was aiming for an even split of transit, bike, and car commuters. And transit and car commuters worked pretty well, but to get the enough bikes responses, I did an intercept survey where I handed out cards on the Hawthorne, Steel, and Broadway bridges 3 different mornings. And in the end, I got over 250 from each of those 3 mode groups. And so this map shows the region, and basically it's the shortest paths between respondents' home and work locations. So all the respondents were commuting to central Portland, as you can see, but they came from all over the region. So about 70% of respondents came from Portland, that's the pink area, and the other 30% came from all over north, south, east, and west. And the way I measured commute well-being or commute happiness was using a scale that was developed by other researchers that have recently been looking at this, and I adapted it a little bit. So it's 7 different questions, Likert scale style, where people rate from -3 to 3 their agreement with these different statements about how stressful their commute was, how confident they would arrive on time, basically how they felt during their commute, and then how they evaluated their commute afterwards. And the questions were about the most recent commute to work, from home to work. And when I averaged those 7 different questions, the scores together, this is sort of the distribution where the 3.0 at the end would be someone that's completely satisfied. That's the sort of the highest level of satisfaction with your commute. And so on the whole, with an average of 1, people are more happy than unhappy with their commutes. But there's a good spread to look at how it varies. And this is how commute well-being varies by mode. So we had bicycle commuters happiest with their commutes, followed by walk commuters, then express bus, that's C-Tran users, followed by light rail users, carpooling folks, and that could include family members, local bus service, and drive alone, the least happy among the sample. In terms of commute options, so I asked people how easy it would be to use different modes to commute to work, and then summed the number of easy responses together. So there was a positive, significant correlation. The greater number of easy modes people had, the happier with their commutes they were. Although the correlation is fairly low. And then I did a ordinary least squares regression where I looked at things like travel time and demographics and all these different factors and how they put them into an equation where commute well-being was the dependent variable, and these are the results. Basically, traffic congestion for car and bus commuters, transit crowding, travel time over 40 minutes, so longer commutes for car commuters, working in the Lloyd Center for bike commuters, and some safety concerns for bike commuters. Those all had negative impacts on commute well-being, whereas biking and walking, high job and home satisfaction, very good health, higher household income, and the attitudes that commutes can be a transition time between home and work, and that for car and transit commuters, they use their trip productively. Those all had positive impacts on commute happiness. And transit variables that weren't significant in this model were transit, the distance between home and work, travel time for bike and transit users, traffic congestion for bike commuters, the number of vehicles available in the household, and number of easy modes, like I showed before, that dropped out of the model, as did most of the demographic variables. Next, I looked at the connection between commute well-being and overall subjective well-being using the satisfaction with life scale that's been used in a lot of these psychology studies. Essentially what this says is that even when you control for income, health, household size, and job and home satisfaction, there's still a positive effect of commute well-being on overall well-being. So essentially a doubling in your commute happiness leads to a 12% increase in your overall well-being, according to this model. So in summary, commuting affects overall well-being, and unlike a lot of areas where it might be hard to increase the happiness of citizens, commuting might be one area where policymakers have a chance of making changes to. And then also, commuting to work by active modes increases commute well-being, even when you control for these different factors. So again, there's a policy implication that encouraging more biking and walking, could perhaps be strengthened by noting its effects on happiness with people's commutes. So thanks to OTREC for helping to support this research. I don't know if there's any time left.
Yeah, we do have time for questions for Oliver.
Yes.
Oh.
Got the mic. So in the model of overall subjective well-being, some weights fell out of that for your 7 dimensions of commute well-being. And I was wondering, in the OLS regression, did you used equal weighting, I think?
I used equal weighting in the OLS regression.
Did you try using the weights that fell out of that second model and in an OLS to see if results changed at all?
I didn't change the weight. Well, there was one factor, the arrival time confidence that had the lowest loading, and you know, below 0.6 is where you start to wonder, maybe throw it out. But it didn't seem, so doing a regression where I only included these factors didn't seem to change the results very much. And because I wanted, you know, in theory, that arrival time confidence I thought was important, I left it in.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering, like, because enjoyment was pretty high, so if you weighted that more in the commute well-being, and there was some correlation with some of the other variables, I didn't know.
Sure. Yeah. To look at some. Okay.
So I was just looking for some clarification. Could you go back to your, I think, your final slide? Because I think it said that one of the ones that fell out was I guess, sorry, not this slide, but the modes. It didn't matter? Or maybe it was various easy options to different modes. Did that, because we saw that it was scaled, that people that were active were higher, and then it sort of went to express bus and all of that. So on the slide that you showed, which didn't, the positive, negative, there you go, not significant. Commute options. So by that, do you mean the options for other types of easy commuting? And can you clarify what that means?
Sure. That was just the asking people how easy it would be to use these different commute modes, and then when I added those together, so someone had 4 easy commute modes, another person only had 1 or even 0 easy modes to get to work, and that I thought would be important, but it turned out to not be significant. And then the modes that are in the model are the like transit, biking, and walking. Those were the modes that people actually used.
I wonder, one thing I'm wondering might explain that, if you've looked at this, is the correlation between the number of easy modes people have and the mode that they actually use. So in other words, people who drive might be more likely to say, I have no other easy modes, and a person who walks might say, yeah, I could walk, bike, transit, you know. And so that might be why it dropped out, because the modes are highly correlated, maybe.
Yeah, I should check on that. Choose first, I think.
Did, on that slide, did the distance drop out because it's sort of reflected in the travel time?
Possibly. It's, I think, travel time, yeah, it was only significant for cars.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Yeah, I think travel time just may have a more important
that's what people are concerned about.
Distance, but anyway, okay. It didn't seem to be very important in my study. It's
okay.
Just for cars.
All right.
Commutes. Most commutes were under an hour. I should say that. There were only about 5 to 10% were longer than an hour.
So I'm pretty fascinated with the negative effect of working at the Lloyd Center.
Oh, yeah.
And I was wondering if you looked at the people who, for that relationship, to see if there were other variables that kind of explain that, like the type of people who are working at the Lloyd Center, or if there was if you looked for any explanation for that.
Well, no, I only just, controlled for the job satisfaction and home satisfaction. I think the Lloyd Center lower negative effect for bike commuters is just due to the auto-oriented layout of Lloyd Center, and how it's just hard to bike commute through R2.
Okay, thanks, Oliver. And we do have time for questions for all 3 speakers, so if you guys can guys can go all up, and we'll see if there's any questions for any one of them. So.
Okay, I have a question for Colin Rowan. I was wondering if you could tell us what kind of difficulties a three-wheel bicycle might encounter as far as infrastructure.
So for three-wheel bicycles, there's a number of issues, and it's something that the city of Portland has been taking a look at. There's actually a program that trains people who haven't been active on bikes, mostly because of balance issues or just comfort, to ride three-wheel bicycles. And they actually have a fleet of three-wheel bicycles, and they train people how to use them. But there are some access issues, such as curb ramps, and even some of the places, if you're familiar with the Tillamook neighborhood greenway, there is a section right before 15th, right around 16th, where there's some access control for cars that allows bicycles and pedestrians to get through, but a three-wheeler would have a lot of difficulty through that. So it's most tricycles will pass through anything that's ADA compliant, but maybe not easily. So if there's difficult angles, or if the higher speed that you would be normally using on a tricycle, if you think of access, posts, bollards on like a multi-use path, that is made, it's ADA compliant, so the wheelchair will get through, so a tricycle will get through as well. But at the speed that you're traveling at normally on say on a bicycle, on a tricycle, it might be difficult to do that. So you'd have to come down to speed, and then you would have to gear back up, which is going to be additional energy.
My question is for Alex. I was actually wondering if there had been any case studies on currently existing truck-only lanes anywhere in some city.
Yeah, good question. There aren't that many around yet. It's kind of a new thing, and there was there's not too much research in terms of the emissions effects, you mean? Yeah, there's not too much research on that. There was some people down at Georgia Tech were looking at it, but they looked at it from a higher level, and so there weren't, there were some differences in, they were looking more at a regional level than a corridor, is essentially the problem. So they're looking more at like origin destinations across the metropolitan region rather than congestion levels. Yeah, so not too much known at this point.
We have a question for the web for Colin. How repeatable is the Portland plan for age-friendly transportation, and is there a template that another community could use to develop the similar plan?
That's a great question. So right now the Portland plan has a number of action items, and one of those action items, which also connects to the World Health Organization designation as an age-friendly city, requires the development of an age-friendly action plan, which should be actionable within 5 years. So that is in draft right now. Alan De La Torre in the Institute of Aging is the project manager for that and is going ahead. And there's also a policy experts group connected to the comprehensive plan, which is being updated for the first time in about 30 years, that will also address a lot of those issues. As far as being able to be repeated, most recently, I believe in the past few months, the National Association for American Association of Retired Peoples, AARP, has taken over the responsibility of age-friendly planning in the United States. So they are currently developing a policy toolkit, and I believe in their Public Policy Institute, so if you search for AARP Public Policy Institute, you should be able to find some information on age-friendly community planning. And also if you go to Portland State's Institute on Aging's website, on the far right-hand corner, they have some age-friendly planning initiatives that can be looked at.
Okay, great, thanks.
I have another question for Colin. Do you have any specific examples of how you kind of would improve paratransit and demand responsive transit? I know you mentioned it on your presentation, but could you give a couple examples?
Thanks. So there's a number of things that can be done right now in Portland. Ride Connection is a nonprofit that provides a form of paratransit, but also TriMet has the Lyft service, and currently Ride Connection is working on a true one-call, one-click protocol so that it doesn't matter what paratransit or demand responsive entity, if it's a nonprofit, say it's Providence that has 10 vans that they use and 3 might be empty, and they could use additional Medicare and Medicaid rides. Having this true sort of network, so this is an IT solution that would be good. But there's also some really interesting things about having vans available, almost more of like a jitney service that is sort of a little bit more informal, or having neighborhood ride sharing where people in a neighborhood say that they're available at a certain time, and possibly having that's a national level sort of thing that would require allowing individuals who aren't service providers but would have some kind of training to provide these sorts of rides. More accessible taxi cabs is also a possibility. And then there's even ideas about this, I don't know if I would agree with, but there's a possibility of getting people who have limited means of buying a car to get a car under the condition that they provide people in their neighborhood, residents around a certain number of rides. That's just going to propagate automobile use, so it might not be the best response.
Okay, probably one more question.
I've also got a question for Colin. How do you go about prioritizing geographic areas for the built environment upgrades that you're recommending?
So it's an interesting question. I think one of the real challenges that Portland is going to face is as they unroll the Portland plan, which has all aspects of the Portland plan has been developed through the lens of equity. And when you look at sort of how broad the definition of equity becomes, and with such limited means to financial means to actually address ailing schools versus older adults' access. But there are a lot of places where you can take a look where a lot of those lay over each other, where there are concentrations of young people, lower income individuals, people without great access to transportation choices, and possibly, say, older adults. And that's true east of I-205. That's where all those, if you're going to develop a heat map, that's where you're going to really see those concentrations. So that would be one way of doing it. But yeah, it's a difficult conversation. I think Portland's plan and changes to the comprehensive plan that are ongoing are moving in the right direction.
All right, thank you. Before we give our speakers one last round of applause, the talk next week will be by Peter Kuntz from Portland's Office of Transportation, titled Confessions of a Traffic Engineer. Sounds good. So thanks, guys.